Hey everyone, the title of today's message is Presence, Part 1. The Bible verse for the day is Mark 2:23 through 24. One Sabbath, Jesus was going through the grain fields, and as they made their way, his disciples began to pluck heads of grain. And the Pharisees were saying to him, "Look, why are they doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath?" Law 101. It actually was not unlawful to pluck a head of grain on the Sabbath. God commanded that his people rest every seventh day, and Moses specified that no fire be lit in its observance, so the Jews prepare their Shabbat food ahead of time. There was also ceremonial law that prohibits stuff, all of which fell into three main categories: no food prep, no making clothes or leather, and no building things. But no plucking wasn't on that list. Leave it to the religious leaders to require more of the people than God did, at the expense of the law's purpose. God wanted the Jews to rest because they spent their days doing physical labor, and the work was never done. For goodness sake, they walked in the desert for 40 years, pulling their homes behind them. So the required rest wasn't for his sake, but for theirs. Just as parents force exhausted little ones to take naps. Back to the story. And Jesus said to them, "Have you never read what David did when he was in need and was hungry, he and those who were with him, how he entered the house of God, and ate the bread of the presence, which is not lawful for any but the priests to eat, and also gave it to those who were with him?" Mark 2:25 through 26. History 101. In Old Testament times, the house of God, known as the tabernacle, was a place where God dwelled in the form of a cloud of pillar of fire. Besides his presence, there was only a few other things in the tent's 2 rooms. First, a golden lampstand made of solid gold and weighing 75 pounds, had 6 arms, with many lamps that burned continuously as the only source of light. Next, on the altar of incense, made from acacia wood, covered with gold and standing 3 feet high. A special concoction burned twice a day. Finally, a small ornate table, also made from acacia wood and covered with gold, sat opposite the lampstand. On it, the priest put 12 loaves of bread. The loaves were baked fresh and replaced each week, acknowledging God's constant presence with the Israelites, hence the name Bread of Presence. Exodus 25:30. And all that to say, the daily rituals of lighting fires, burning incense, and baking bread were done to honor God's presence, because he was in the room. Stick a pin in that. Despite God's great favor towards David and his resulting victories on the battlefield, the guy could be a piece of work. He often let physical urges dictate his behavior, and this particular incident was no different. David was on King Saul's most wanted list, and he was tired, hungry, and on the run. So he racked up 3 violations. 1, David entered the house of God, a place where only priests were allowed to go. 2, David lied to the priest, telling him that he was on a secret mission from Saul. Nope. And 3, David all but demanded to eat the bread of the presence, food only priests were allowed to eat. Ironically, the rule-obsessed Pharisees held David in the highest possible regard, but this new guy and his disciples with their heads of grain plucking, how dare them? As would become his habit, Jesus exposed the hypocrisy of their disgust and redirected the conversation to something far more disturbing. To be continued. Today's prayer focus. Ask God to reveal to you where your value rules over relationship. And questions moving forward. With all its pomp and circumstance, do you find talk of the tabernacle interesting or boring, and why? Imagine the room where God's presence dwelled. Imagine approaching the cloud or pillar of fire. How would standing in his presence in that warm and quiet place affect the way you view the requirements of the law? And now imagine walking with Jesus. Imagine the unrestricted access, the casual conversation, and the warmth of his personality. That's all. Just imagine. Oh, wouldn't that be great? That's all that I have for today. I hope you all have a blessed evening, and I will be back on here tomorrow. Thank you.